seconds to join in here, then we'll get started. Make sure this is getting tweeted out. All right, looks like a couple people are coming in, getting notifications. All right, well, welcome to Dynasty Pawn Shop. My name's Clay Hodges. You can find me on Twitter at NotDuckHodges. Here with my co-host for the Dynasty Pawn Shop, talking to Eric Romoff. Eric, give us a little introduction, a little background.
Yeah, Eric Romoff. I'm a contributor for GoingFor2.com, just like my dude Clay here. Find me on Twitter at FantasyNav. Do a good amount of DFS work. Happy to spin up a little bit of a closer look at Dynasty here with my guy Clay.
Let's talk a little bit about that real quick. DFS versus Dynasty, because I'm a DFS guy myself and really just started getting into Dynasty the last couple of years. But, I mean, what's the draw to you? Because to me, they're like on the opposite ends of the spectrum on, I guess, the addiction on what you like doing.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that they are on the opposite ends there, right? For me, it's much more kind of broader game theory that draws me into DFS, right? Trying to understand the marketplace and how it perceives a player on any given night. Just how dynamic it is night in and night out. Really, just a ton of fun to chase. And the dynasty side is really the opposite side of that coin, right? It's the long game. It's really understanding a much smaller market, that of your league mates. Understanding where they plant their values and how you can ultimately get the most value extracted out of your assets when you're interacting with them.
Yeah, and I think I kind of compare it to let's see, like Dynasty's like a nice like whiskey you're just sipping on. It's something you enjoy. The slow burn. It's DFS. That's like heroin, just mainlining. Not that anyone has ever done heroin. We know this, but it's just like the ultimate rush. You're in, you're out. Hopefully, you're making some big money. Or Dynasty, you're just sitting back. Let's talk a little bit about the Dynasty Pawn Shop, Eric. I think our plan-ish, just depending on what this crazy world offers us, is trying to do this, once every couple weeks, cover a position. Tonight we'll do quarterbacks. By the way, anybody in the chat, feel free to get in your questions, shoot them to us. We'll either answer them as they're coming up, if they seem, pertinent to what we're discussing, or we'll save them till the end. But by all means, please get those questions in. I think the plan maybe a post-free agency pod, just address some risers and fallers, because we'll be running through some assumptions. Let me ask you, Eric, how many dynasty leagues are you in? Let me start there.
So I've got 5 now. I actually picked up a couple of startups heading into the 21 season. So I have one that I've been working with for several years. I've been adding a few more over these last few.
And when if you're theoretically you're going to add another one, what I usually do it right around March. I try to do it before the NFL draft, like right after free agency. So I think this is kind of pertinent. This is when people are really starting to think either they're going to adopt some of those teams that were abandoned or just start a fresh new league. This is usually the sweet spot, I would say.
Yeah, I would think generally as well, right? This is the window. At least for me, it's about being able to maneuver and operate with as much information as possible. So this is really the time of year where we start to get a better picture of how free agency is going to play out. Start to have a better handle of which teams are looking at whom in the draft. So you really start to get some of those breadcrumbs coming together this time of year. Actually, one of the startup leagues that I picked up this year, we kicked off on the Tuesday after week 17 because we were all missing football already, and wanted to at least have something to talk about and focus our energy on. So I think this time of year makes sense, but it's Dynasty, right? It's a year-round game. There's no right or wrong time to do it.
Exactly. And, after we do like a post-free agency, see kind of where the pieces moved, we'll probably do a pre-draft pod, maybe and we can figure this out, but our favorite prospects by position, ideal landing spots, if they went to some of those ideal landing spots, where we think they should go if you're drafting in a full league right now. Because I know like people last year went crazy for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and we're like drafting him number 2 overall in dynasty leagues. There's just that rookie mania. It'll happen again. Trevor Lawrence will probably be there, spoiler alert, but we'll try to do some pre-draft, and then obviously post-draft maybe circle back, and that gets us kind of into probably rookie drafts for dynasty if you're starting to do those. Most, I guess, rookie drafts, at least the ones I'm in, usually happen after the draft, like you said, Eric, to have the most information possible, so you know where they're playing, who their competition may or may not be, and whether you think they'll get playing time early or later. It all depends on the spot.
Yeah, completely right. So much of it is about the opportunity these players are walking into.
So let's jump into just our kind of our intro segment that we'll cover each week. And since we don't know our viewers yet, and feel free in the chat to let us know, but I'm sure it's going to run the spectrum where maybe you're thinking about joining a dynasty league and you're saying, what the heck do I need to know? There might be seasoned people. It's gonna vary. But what we thought we were going to do, and we can think of a clever name for this, but some Dynasty 101, just what to know before you're pawning your assets. And basically what I mean here is, before you go into that pawn shop, you need to have some background, some knowledge and on how to operate a dynasty league. And the first thing I wanted to share with you, Eric, is, I think the first thing you've probably seen in your leagues is you're going to have, depending on the size, at least a couple, it always seems, that just care more about the chase for this dynasty, the super team of prospects. So they chase the youth, the draft picks, and the first time they lose a game, they're jettisoning all their players and just hoarding picks, hoarding the youth, because they think that's how it's going to go. And before I give my opinion on it, I mean, what's the most, if for someone watching that says, why is that a bad idea? Eric, why don't you share a little bit like what that means to you? What are they doing wrong, if you think they're doing something wrong?
Yeah. So, to your point about us having probably a pretty mixed audience tuning in, you'll hear me say this a lot. In the dynasty world, it depends, right? So much of our answers really depend on the context of your league, on the context of your team. At least for me, the sort of default lens that you should view your team through is about a 2 to 3 season picture, right? Am I putting my team in a position where, with a few things breaking my way, a couple of moves, a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years down the road, I can compete for a title? So, to the point of your question, if you have a team that's just stacked with all of these future assets, at a certain point, that can is just continuing to be kicked down the road, right? They're always 3 years out. So it's very much so important to value the capital that those assets and those draft picks bring to your team. But if that's all you have, you're always going to be in this sort of middling kind of rebuilding loop until you really start to make a push for competing.
Yeah, it seems that everyone, and I'm guilty of it too, but you just kind of chase this idea of, I'm going to have this juggernaut team for a good 5-year chunk, and I'm just gonna be bad for 2 years and then just reap the benefits. One, we don't always get it right. Just admit it. When you can swallow your pride and just say, hey, I'm going to be wrong on some of my prognostication. Just understand that you're going to be wrong, and if something bad happens, catastrophic injury, then you've kind of it could be a lost season. But I also think about it like this, Eric. It just depends on the buy-in. But say you're having 12 teams, and it's $100 buy-in. There's $1,200 there. You're looking at roughly $900 or something payout there. You're trying to win money. It's good money. So you need to be figuring out how to win. And really, you only have to win, if you think of it that way, you only have to win maybe once a decade if your dynasty league stays active that long. So I kind of always try to think the opposite, to be honest, is, can I make moves now to basically put myself in the best position to win that money, and then I will work on rebuilding if need be. Just trying to just sell off right there just is counterintuitive to me, because then people just keep donating their money and just keep saying next year's the year for me. Now, I think for people that are new to Dynasty or thinking about joining in, you can spot these guys pretty early on, and you can take good advantage of them because they will value that first round pick more than an established veteran. And as we're doing quarterbacks today. Quarterbacks have a shelf life of 20 years, so trading to get the 30-year-old quarterback, you could still have 10 years shelf life there. I think you're going to be happy with that trade. But that's kind of what I think the big thing. Yep. Going for two said win now is something people forget. I think that's probably the biggest mistake I see in dynasty leagues. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah. So many things have to go right and go so well in order to really compete for a title that, when you sort of move that marker further down the road, that picture gets blurrier and blurrier, right? So you can do all the right things to set yourself up for a year from now, for 2 years from now. But when you actually get to that point, everything has to fall in your favor, right? So I do think it's fair to say that the current moment that your league is in is often sometimes of an afterthought, relative to how teams put together their picture for the next kind of 3 to 5 year window.
And so let me ask you this kind of a subtopic on this same thing is I do think it is important to try to keep a stable of either prospects or draft picks. How do you like to quantify the unknowns, like a first round pick? What's that worth to you? Do you use a trade calculator? Do you go by gut? Do you poll Twitter and see what they say? Kind of how do you go about gauging that? Because I think that's to me, the calculators are science, but I think there's an art to it as well. So it's trying to find that right mix because it's tough sometimes.
Yeah, at least for me, it's really all of the above, right? Like I'm gonna take as much input as I can when I'm trying to make these decisions. And honestly, to a fault, right? There have been a number of times since I started playing Dynasty where watching the tape on someone, watching them perform on the field, I feel really good about them as a prospect. But then I do a little bit of reading here. I look at this analyzer there. I pull Twitter, like you said, and I allow those to kind of move me off of my initial read, right? So it is very much so that balance of the science and the art. And one thing that I'm really trying to maintain and make a focus for this year coming up is really trusting what my eyes tell me when I watch these players out there on the field.
And one thing I do love about Dynasty more than just like a redraft league, and usually redraft you're with your friends and your buddies, but I'm sure it's the same with you, Eric. For most everybody, if one of your buddies is offering you a trade, you're immediately like, "What the hell is this guy up to?" And I know I'm doing it the other way. I'm up to something, and so it doesn't really foster trades. And plus, in redraft, you can't trade picks. Here, you have those assets. So even though you might want the Cooper Cups of the world, you don't have someone currently of the relative value. You can find a draft pick and help do it. I think with trading for Dynasty, one of the things I always try to do is I try not to kick myself too much about one trade, beat myself up over it. And how I try to do that is I try to make a lot of trades so I don't get paralyzed just really saying if I make this trade, am I doing the right or wrong thing? If I'm firing off 3-5 trades per season, if I hit 3 of 5 or whatever the case may be, I'm still net positive. So then I don't have to dwell. Or if I know I'm overpaying a little bit, but I need this guy to win the championship this year. That's if the more you guys pull the trigger, don't get paralyzed by trades thinking I'm getting screwed over. Like Eric said, use a combination of public opinion, the trade calculator, just what you're seeing, your gut. If it's close, I always kind of just say pull the trigger. Why not? If that's what you're trying to do to better your team. If you're doing that more often than not, then at least you have plenty of trades out there that you won't be individually grading them and saying that was really stupid of me in hindsight.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? Like fortune favors the bold, right? The people that are out there trying to make moves and trying to improve their team, they're not going to get all of them right, but the more they're transacting, the larger their portfolio is, right? Just like we talk about with betting, just like we talk about with investing, just like we talk about with DFS, right? So if you're being aggressive and you're working to improve your team, you're finding those points where your player, your asset is at their highest, and that's when you're shipping them off. In the long run, ending up winning 60% of them, 70% of them, your team is going to be far better off than if you take the conservative tack and maybe make a couple of deals throughout the year. Because if either of those break the wrong way, then you're probably going to be on the wrong side of the playoff picture.
Exactly. And Eric, he didn't have a question, but he made a good point in the chat, and then we can segue into the QBs. But he basically said the value of draft picks fluctuates throughout the year. A first rounder in September is worth a whole lot less than one in February, in his opinion, he says. And I would agree with Eric, because right now we're kind of getting into rookie fever. There's like 5 quarterbacks that could be drafted in the top 10, which means all these running backs and receivers are going to be available. Like, there's just prospect draft pick frenzy right now, and you can really capitalize if we do a time machine back to September 2020, that same pick, one, you don't know when in the first round it would be, but two, there wasn't that much hype. So right now you can use kind of what Eric was talking about and try to capitalize if you want, or do the inverse if you're in love with these guys or want to get more picks because you're just high on these running backs or whatever the case may be. That's something to do. So good point there, Eric. So let's jump into the Dynasty QBs and how we'll do this. We'll use Fantasy Pros so everyone can kind of know what we're looking at. Now, make sure you're careful if you pull it up. For anyone trying to look at yourself, make sure you're looking at their Dynasty rankings, because they have rankings for redraft and all that. And so you might see us say something like, what the hell are they talking about? They're not ranked that way, as it tries to weight by their age, their projections, all that fun stuff. So make sure you're looking at the right one. And then this is the only one we have to caveat, really, we're kind of looking, in my opinion, I'm looking through the lens of a super flex league. I don't know about you, Eric, because if this was just a 1 QB league, I don't even know if it's really worth talking. There's 10 QBs that I think are pretty good, and I'd be happy with any of them. So my advice to you, if it's a single QB league, is get with the times and go to 2 QBs. But also, you can probably wait and you want the other skill positions. Eric, agree, disagree?
Yeah, every single one of my dynasty teams is super flex. It adds in that layer, right? With single QB, it's basically a matter of whoever is going to wait the longest is probably going to get the best value out of their position. So super flex and 2 QB is really the only way to play dynasty, if you're asking my opinion.
And what's your typical league size? Let me ask you, is it 12?
Yeah, they're predominantly 12. I got a group of friends that are all gluttons for punishment, so we've got a 16-team super flex league out there. So every quarterback that takes the field is in play, and you have to figure out when you're going to bite the bullet and roll out an actual flex player instead of the QB. So that one it has led to some long nights combing the wire.
I was going to say one thing. We're going to run under the assumption it's a 12-team league, which I think is a good size. But if it's 14 or, God forbid, 16, I think the value of QBs in a Superflex league just skyrockets, because some of these, once you get into the 20s, I think there's just hot garbage, and you don't know when they're going to get benched or no longer be a starting QB. So the more teams you have in your league, the more of a priority I would take or set on getting these QBs. With that, if you have Fantasy Pros in front of you, Eric, I will let you lead off. Let's do who do we have higher than, or who do you rank higher than what Fantasy Pros has for quarterbacks?
Yeah, so at least for me, the guy that jumps off the page on their dynasty rankings is all the way down at number 8. My guy, Danger Russ Wilson. It feels about right, just kind of looking at how he finished out the season. But if you sort of zoom out a little bit and just look at the entirety of his 2020 season or the entirety of his career, a top 8 finish is a pretty disappointing year for him. Rewind just a few months ago, and he was pretty firmly in that top 3, top 5 conversation. So for me, seeing Russell Wilson all the way down there at 8, if I was in a startup draft today and I was able to get him as the 8th quarterback off the board, I'm feeling pretty happy with that value. So I think that one's a bit of a slight, just given what we've seen Russell Wilson do on the field throughout his career.
And honestly, I only had a couple that I wanted to really talk about to rank higher, and Russell Wilson was one of them. And just so if no one has it pulled up, just he's sandwiched in between Herbert at 7 and Burrow at 9, and I like both Herbert and Burrow. But one thing I like, I guess maybe I'm a little bit more conservative when it comes to Dynasty, but I want to see at least, I usually say like 18 games or a season and a half of data, like stats and footage, before I really hang my hat on Justin Herbert being better than Russell Wilson. In a vacuum, that sounds crazy, but obviously Herbert is 21, 22. Wilson's, I think, 31. So that's how he vaulted him. But to me, it goes Mahomes, how the fancy pros have it: Mahomes, Murray, Watson, Allen, Jackson, Prescott, Herbert, Wilson. Wilson, I definitely in front of Herbert, but I could see an argument pretty much, I think, maybe all the way up to 5. With Dak's injury, Lamar fell off a little bit. Maybe defenses figured him out. He's a risk. I think he's high upside, but also he could fall even further down next year. So, yeah, Russ, like I said, the QBs, they have a shelf life of, till they're 40 now. He's still got a good 8, 9 years maybe in him. I would take him than the uncertainty at some of these guys ranked a little bit higher, and you can deal with finding another QB in those 8 years. It doesn't have to be instantly.
Yeah, exactly right. And to your point about that, season and a half sample size, look right in that territory where we're thinking about moving them. I would bump them up to 5 as well. And right there, at least on Fantasy Pros, their rankings 4 and 5, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, 2 guys that before a full 18 game sample size and after, we had 2 entirely different feelings about, right? So I think your point is perfectly fair with the guys heading into their sophomore season. Herbert especially, and Burrow to a lesser extent certainly performed better than really kind of the top side of their range for their rookie season. So hats off to them. But we're talking about in both of their cases less than 16 games of tape. So to push down some of these known and proven commodities for guys that had a good season and granted are very young, just feels like a little bit of a reach for me.
And I'll go ahead and add another one just so you don't steal my last one from me here. The one I was also looking at is Matt Stafford, who on here is ranked 15th. He's just behind Jalen Hurts and Tua. Once again, youth is dominating. But to me, Matthew Stafford, new environment. He's only 33, so in theory, he still has a good 6, 7 years. And he's the type of QB that you would think can just sling it back there in the pocket until he wants to hang it up. And even Baker's at 12. I could probably make an argument for 12. Tannehill's at 11. I think Tannehill, let me check here. Tannehill's old too. Well, not old, but he's 32. They just lost their offensive coordinator. I can make an argument just to get him there. And then Rodgers is at 10. Rodgers is a little bit older. He's been up and down the last couple of years. Obviously, this last year was awesome. I think Stafford could be a good back end QB1 for you, and if you can get him while people are running after Hurts or Tua, I like that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree, especially comparatively to the guys around him. Right, he's sort of sandwiched right after Hurts and Tua, right before Wentz and Cousins. Like all 4 of those guys have a ton of question marks in their game, and specifically for Hurts and for Tua, this is one of those cases where youth carries a bit too much of a premium in my mind. Right, having the value on draft picks is one thing, but evaluating a player, markedly higher just because they're younger at their position, it's a bit of a trap as I look at it. So I tend to agree. What Matt Stafford has been able to do thus far in his career, with very limited support around him, is nothing short of amazing. I don't expect to see his ADP really move that far away from 15. So I'm anticipating having a good amount of Matt Stafford as we head into 21 season. But looking at him right around in that kind of 10 to 12 turn is where he would fit in on my ratings.
Yeah, and we had another question in the chat from Eric again, Eric Johnson, like Eric Romoff. He asked for Russ. Does the OC change worry you guys? Does it worry us? Because Schottenheimer was let go because of the philosophical differences. I mean, all these reports are coming out regarding Russ and what's going on now. I don't know when Fantasy Pros updated this so that if they're taking into account these trade rumors and this locker room rift, that's why he's at 8. But I mean, it's Russ Wilson. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. One, he has a no trade clause, so he's not going to accept a trade to a rebuilding team and just kind of be left in the sewers for a couple of years while he builds them back up. To me, I guess Russ, regardless of what happens, whether he stays in Seattle or if he gets moved at some point, I think his floor is 8. It doesn't really scare me if they say, okay, he's traded tomorrow. I would say that I think it's the status quo for me. So nothing really worries me about where he's at or the OC change. I mean, everyone always says let Russ cook. We'll see if they ever do that. But they did for the first part of the season last year, and then that went away. But Eric, what do you think? Trade rumors,
Yeah.
OC change. What does it do to you?
So I'll look at the trade rumors sort of as a wash, kind of net neutral, right? If he were to leave, I would imagine that he ends up in a comparable, if not somewhat better situation, because he does have that no trade clause. So the likelihood that he's walking into a downgrade of situation is mitigated by way of that clause. In terms of the OC change, I mean it's fair. It's disappointing that we saw the first half of the season where he was really unbridled and was the QB1 for a good part of the 2020 season, and now it looks like those offensive philosophical differences means a bit more of that conservative offense. So at least for me, the thing that has always had Russell Wilson at a premium in my rankings is that floor, right? He's consistent enough with his feet. He throws to the end zone at a rate that's one of the top percentages in the league. So he's just such a consistent contributor. If we were to find himself with an offensive regime that really just took the bridle off of him and let him cook, then I think he's legitimately in this top 5 conversation immediately, top 3 even. But even in absence of that, he's just such a consistent player that I'm so comfortable with him inside of that top 10.
Do you have anyone else that you had ranked? You had ranked higher than what Fantasy Pros had him at?
So it feels about right. As we kind of head down into that 20 plus area, I do think that Daniel Jones at 20 is a little too low. I'd have him kind of in that 16, 17 range or so. He hasn't done a ton to really impress in at least over sustained periods of time. But if you're looking at this kind of category, this back third, if you will, he's arguably one of the more consistent deliverables of the football in that range. Right, he throws with accuracy. He's shown to throw into some tight windows, but he also offers a pretty considerable upside with his legs, especially as you look around and see Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Tom Brady, and Sam Darnold around him, right? So to have a player that is at least mostly accurate with the football and can deliver pretty consistently on the ground, 20 feels like a bit of a slight for me.
Oh man, I can't wait. That's a good just a teaser here. Is I have the opposite take, but before we get into that, is there anyone else you wanted to discuss that you want to say? I'm planting my flag. I got them ranked higher.
So those are the 3 that I had circle from Fantasy Pros right there. They are putting together their consensus rankings. So At least in my mind, it's going to be one of the more accurate lists out there.
Yeah, I would say Fantasy Pros is a good gauge, and you can imagine always think for yourself, but you cannot imagine that it's the most, I think, well-known site. So your league mates are looking at it as well. So when you start making those trade offers, you kind of know kind of the cheat sheet of what they're doing. Well, then let's segue into guys we have lower, and I'm just going to kind of cheat here. I have like a whole bucket, and Daniel Jones falls into this bucket, Eric. But really, it kind of starts right after Matthew Stafford at 16. But really, you're playing with fire with these guys at 16, a handful of them at 16 and below, and I'll go into each one specifically here in a second. The guys that this might be their last year starting, and like you were just talking about, Eric, if we're in a 2 QB league, if we're in your 16-team league, someone's going to have to start, theoretically. Carson Wentz is their best quarterback. And I think I just put this in the playing with fire bucket. So to me, Carson, and this is kind of a stretch, these first couple, but Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan they might draft his replacement. Jared Goff maybe in Detroit. Your boy Daniel Jones, I think he's one of the ones. It might be his last year as the starter if he doesn't pull it around. So you're banking on him showing that improvement. I'm worried that he's going to continue to regress, and the Giants say, we got to go another direction. Tom Brady, but we know it's just because he's old. But while you have him, he's great. Sam Darnold, Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock he scares the crap out of me. He's the worst. Jimmy Garoppolo at 27. So I just named like 6 or 7. Long story short, what I wanted to emphasize here is I think this year, especially, I think there's about 14, 15, arguably QBs you can really hang your hat on and go get. Besides that, you're then starting to play with fire. And if you're running into, if I draft, let's say I draft Russell Wilson, and then my next one is Jared Goff, and then I say I need a third. My third one is Drew Lock. I mean, you could be toast during the season, before the season, who knows, for 2021. So that's when I say those guys, they're all like kind of in the 20s, and I still say they're ranked too high. They have to be somewhere. So I guess what I'm trying to say is get your guys or get your QBs early. I know I was taking shots at your boy Daniel Jones and some of these other guys, but Eric, of those, that silly bucket I did, who would you say, hey, Clay, you're jumping the gun there. You're getting a little too nervous.
Yeah, I think it's fair to categorize all of them as playing with fire, right? You look really, Carson Wentz on down, 16 on down. You don't feel very good about yourself trotting out any of these guys as you want, and to a lesser extent, you too, right? So I think it's fair to say that these are all guys that you're not super thrilled about having on your team. There are a couple of spots, Tom Brady, like you mentioned, where he will continue to contribute for as long as he's out there. It's just how long he's out there is a question mark. I look at Daniel Jones in a similar light. The running contribution is great, but really the biggest question mark is how long he'll have the opportunity. Really for me, just kind of on a broader dynasty strategy perspective, is when you start to get into this kind of back third of the rankings, this is where I really start to introduce more of the rookie quarterback class, to the extent that I have the picks to acquire them, right? I ideally, if I'm making a decision between Sam Darnold or Teddy Bridgewater, and that is going to be my third quarterback on my roster, I would just as soon have one of the top 3 to 4 quarterbacks coming into this year's class as a bit more of a developmental project than the guys that are kind of getting washed through and repeated throughout the league.
Yeah, I would agree. Once you get into here, this is one of the rare times I would say just run to the youth if you can. Now it'll be interesting. This will be really fun to track, to be honest, because it's just so people know if they probably don't have it up. Trevor Lawrence is ranked at 24th on their rankings. If you wait for Trevor Lawrence, you're not for into the 20s. You're not going to get him. I don't know right now where I would say the right spot for him is, but I mean, you could make an argument to have him before Carson Wentz. I mean, you're still playing with fire with these rookies. I know that, but like you said, Eric, there's just something to at least knowing you have 2 to 3 years if he struggles before you know he's meeting his maker. Whereas Daniel Jones, that clock's ticking. Carson Wentz, if he struggles again, his clock's it's done. So it's gonna Trevor Lawrence. Let me ask you this: just looking at this ranking, if you're going into a draft, let's just say 12 teams, when do you think someone's going to do this? I know someone's going to do something insane, but when do you think you could see someone pull the trigger? And you say, okay, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if Trevor Lawrence makes it out of the first round in Dynasty Superflex this year. A couple of the startups that I've already done, the rights to the 1-1 in the rookie draft,
Yeah.
went in the back half of round one, right? And I think there are two things to consider there, right? The first is really everything that you touched on, right? Carson Wentz, Cousins, Jared Goff, like these are all kind of replacement level quarterbacks. So you're asking yourself, is this highly touted prospect more or less likely than anyone else to be sort of average? And I think that it's fair to say that Trevor Lawrence or whoever the first quarterback off the board in years to come might be has a pretty good shot of being average. And the runway they have, they have time to develop. When an organization invests a high pick in a player, they're going to try to support that player and give them every opportunity to develop and succeed. So there's some kind of inherent considerations that I think makes it more valuable to have Trevor Lawrence in this case than kind of these replacement level quarterbacks that are out there. The second thing to consider, going back to our earlier points about really considering your league a marketplace, is people go crazy for the first quarterback off the board. Leading into the draft, leading into OTAs and some of the training camp time. So even if you don't necessarily love the fact that you might have Trevor Lawrence as your QB2, somebody else in your league would love to acquire them, and you can probably get quite a handsome return coming back to you. So those two things combined, I do find myself reaching into that rookie quarterback class a little bit earlier than I do with some of the other positions regarding rookies.
And you just said, yeah, the 1.1 in your drafts is going late first round. I usually would say that's like about top 5 QBs. And I was looking at the bet because Fantasy Pros is composite of everyone's rankings. The best ranking someone has them is at number 6. I think that's aggressive, but if you want if that's your guy, you're going to have to do it. And I wouldn't cringe at anyone doing that. I'm just sometimes a pussy when it comes to that, and I would rather have Dak Prescott coming off an injury. But I mean, if you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be amazing. So I don't know why I'm saying I wouldn't do that, but you know what you're getting with a Dak. I could probably see an argument over Herbert and Burrow just because they're still young. So maybe 6, 7. Yeah, I don't know. That's crazy. And we'll wait till the later shows when we do the post free agency leading up to the draft with these other guys. But it's going to be pretty exciting because I think what we alluded to earlier, there could be 5 or 6 that could be starting in the first year, and their fans are going to be excited about them. So, yeah. Is there anyone else, Eric, that you have that you want to downgrade over the Fantasy Pros ranking?
I mean, I think it's a pretty clean list. There are a couple of guys that we already touched on that feel a little bit out of place. Just giving it another scan here. Um, Ryan Tannehill at 11 feels a bit too high. Um, given his age, given the offensive scheme that they run, I could see knocking him back closer to that 15 range a bit. But I mean, overall, it's an awesome resource, right? It's a real good way to kind of see where the majority of people will rank these players. So overall, I don't have any huge qualms with the list.
I can
other than the ones that we called out.
I can tell you're a DFS guy. I would have known that if you hadn't said it just by saying Ryan Tannehill was ranked too high, because he is just ultra efficient. He doesn't he gets it done on so much fewer pass attempts. And when it comes to DFS, we're just looking at that opportunity, and he just never has it because he throws the ball 20 times. But then those times he throws it, he's 16 for 20 with 4 touchdowns. He rushes one in. Like, he just gets it done. So I kind of agree. Yeah, it's just he's not the sexiest name there, and he's already 32, which it seems crazy to think about. I guess I like him more than Baker, though, so it's tough to say. The next like kind of little segment, some QBs we're keeping an eye on pre-free agency. We probably also roll in the draft. I guess who are the most volatile, where you really want to see them shake out. And I'll kind of lead the way so you see what I'm talking about. And I think it's probably the most obvious one, but it'll be the New Orleans Saints quarterback situation. Fantasy Pros has Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill as 29 and 30. It's basically they know one of them. Yeah, and now I'm hearing rumors of Drew Brees might be coming back. That's insane. I hope he does. That I hate the Saints. I don't know about you, but he's just tanking him and his legacy. So good for him if he wants to come back. But obviously Jameis Winston, if he signs with the Saints, I don't know where you would put him because they would still run this stupid Taysom Hill offense, and it just siphons away opportunities for Jameis. So I don't know. That'd be so tough for me what to do. I think Jameis would be a good one. But if Jameis signs somewhere else, then Taysom, I think, kind of skyrockets because he just has that rushing upside. Now, I don't know how long term he can be, but in the short term, I think he can disguise what I think would be him kind of a shitty passer with just being able to run the ball. I'll give him credit for doing that. And he could probably throw the ball to himself or do something stupid and get a lot of fantasy points. So to me, that's like my one. I want to know what's going to happen there with Jameis, New Orleans. Is there any other teams or quarterbacks you're just saying, hey, the free agency is going to be huge for him?
Yeah, I mean, at least speaking to the New Orleans situation, it is a outright avoid if both of these players are suiting up in New Orleans next year. I think one of them has to head out the door for either of them to have value. And if we were to see Winston sign anywhere, I think we would see both of these players vault back into those kind of high teens, low 20s, right? So I was laughing when you were teeing it up because this is basically Fantasy Pros saying, "Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, so we'll just rank them at here in the 30s, right?" To kind of the broader point of your question, the free agent class for quarterback this year is super thin, right? You got Dak up top, and at least for me, I expect him to be franchise tagged again. I would be shocked if he leaves Dallas. If he does, I think you can make an argument for him maybe walking up a spot or two. But I mean, he's got so many weapons around him in that offense that it's hard to really imagine much of an upgrade to situation out there. After that, it gets thin quick, right? You're looking at Winston, you're looking at Cam, you're looking at Mitch Trubisky. So to that point, all of these guys are here in the 30s of the rankings, really just waiting for clarity on their situation. If Mitch Trubisky signs somewhere, I don't think he's going to be number 31 on the rankings, right? I think he's kind of in that mid 20s. So at least for me, this is going to get clear as we head into that free agency picture, but there's not really going to be a ton of free agent movement in the quarterback ranks, at least as I see it heading into the offseason.
And I have a couple ones here. The big one to me is what's going to happen with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think he's going to leave Miami, which I think makes Tua a little bit more secure because, and I agree, people love Fitzpatrick. He puts up stats. He's not the best actual QB for your franchise. I mean, he's like 40 years old. You obviously don't want him as your QB, but from fantasy perspective, when he plays, he just scores points. And so if he's still on the Dolphins, the fans are going to clamor for him if Tua struggles. But two, if Fitzpatrick, I just saw today, he was talking about he thinks he's demonstrated he can still play at a high level. I think he can for a crappy team. I just don't think he can navigate a good team anywhere. But I do think he'll probably get another shot. So wherever he signs, it's going to be scary. He'll probably have to sign for like a backup or to be in a battle, but I think he'll probably get some starts this year. So it'll be scary wherever he goes. What before I jump into my last one, the last guy I want to talk about, what do you think about like Fitzy and Tua?
Yeah, so I do think that Fitz leaves town, and that definitely does secure Tua's position a bit. I understand why Flores did it because he is there to win games, and rightfully so. Found that he was winning more games with Fitzpatrick, but just overall for Tua's development, for his mental stability and his confidence in the job, I think it's best for both of them if he leaves town. In terms of where he heads, like he's the perfect bridge quarterback, right? Look over some of these situations that are trying to either find an answer for the next season or season and a half, or very likely, which has been the story of his career for the last 10 years, find his way into a starting position for a team that then turns around and drafts a rookie quarterback. Maybe a team like Carolina comes to mind, maybe the Bears, somewhere that the quarterback position is a legitimate question mark. But just because history repeats itself, if he finds himself a starting job, it almost seems destined that wherever he goes is going to draft his replacement in this year's draft.
Yep, and I think you made a good comment about Fitzy is a good bridge quarterback. The guy I have to talk about, you said his name. He's probably the opposite of the bridge quarterback. I love him to death. He's my favorite, like my favorite football player of all time is Cam Newton. And Cam Newton, he's probably going to go somewhere else. And why I said he's the opposite of bridge quarterback, I mean, it breaks my heart to say this, but his on-field talent, what he has now, he's a running back. He just got destroyed. He doesn't have it anymore. But he comes into, by all reports, he goes into these locker rooms. He commands the respect. He's the immediate leader of the team. I don't know where you can put him in one to be a backup because he will just try to take it. Like poor Jarrett Stidham got destroyed. He had no chance. You can't put him in like Chicago with Trubinsky. Everyone, all the players are going to gravitate towards Cam. But yeah, just Cam's talent, his arms failing, his knees are failing. It's tough, but to me, it's going to be from a fantasy perspective, it's important because Cam's going wherever he goes and to throw a wrench into whatever's happening because he's too much of a competitor to just take a mentor job or a backup job. He's going to go in there, compete, and inadvertently, the locker room's going to gravitate towards him if he's doing just as bad or just as good, or the other starter like a Trubinsky's playing poorly because that's just how Cam is. I'm wearing a Super Bowl 50 hoodie. You can probably guess who I was going for. There it was Denver versus Carolina. That wasn't a good day for me, but Cam, I said I love Cam, but I do not draft Cam. He's going the way of Donovan McNabb. He's going to get chewed up and spit out pretty soon, but I think he's got one more landing spot. I don't know where it's going to be, but he is going to inadvertently just make that competition a living hell, and then you don't want either part of it. Eric, tell me you love Cam Newton.
I love what Cam Newton used to be.
For 1 year. For 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, I've owned a lot of Cam Newton shares over the years. I even picked up him in a few spots heading into this season, and for 3 weeks or so, I looked like a genius, right?
Yep.
And then basically everyone caught up to the fact that he's just a running back, and he was basically unreliable and couldn't be started for the majority of the season this year. I do think that he'll probably find his way out of New England and at least into a competition for a job. It's hard to say where he lands. At least for me, I would think that an organization that would consider him is one that's maybe trying to make a bit more of a splash, right? Really trying to, win over some engagement and some enthusiasm with their fans, but deep down they know they're not really competitive.
I just can't think of where that would be though. But you're right. I just don't know
Yeah,
where. It's just so hard because if it's a young QB, he's gonna. I mean, you're just chewing up that young QB's confidence. I just don't know. You can't go to Denver because you're just saying Drew. You're just giving the finger to Drew Lock. Like those young QBs, they're just
Denver
toast.
Denver's one of the teams that I think about in this context, and to your point, is basically them saying we are done with Drew Lock, right?
Yep.
Which is really the point, right? Like any of these teams that might consider him that have a young quarterback, they are essentially saying that they are moving on from that quarterback by taking Cam Newton into the locker room. Honestly, this pains me more than anything as a Houston Texans fan, a bemoaned Houston Texans fan.
Oh yes,
I
you're
think
right.
if they let Watson go and they want to try to get some enthusiasm, Cam might fit in there, which hurts me for a whole variety of different reasons.
Sean Sullivan in the chat said it, I think, the same time you said it. That's actually a really good spot. That makes too much sense. And he went to Blinn Community College outside A&M for a little bit after stealing laptops. But that's neither here nor there.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. He might have written his name on the bottom of it. Yeah, Houston makes too much sense now. If that Cam, go to Houston. Houston, trade Watson to whoever, trade him to Carolina, just go full circle. Cam, go to Houston. Maybe even CMC gets thrown into that trade somehow, so then it's Cam and CMC reunited, like you said. But it would be a train wreck. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there. We got about 10 minutes left. We had this segment. We're kind of like hawk it or lock it. Do we want to come up with 3 QBs that we're trying to buy, sell, keep? We can try to do this on the fly. Sean also said Washington for Cam Newton. Oh, that's so scary. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they don't have the young QB. Back with Ron Rivera, that's scary. But you're on to something, Sean. You're a smart dude. So real quick, maybe if there's one QB on this list that you're trying to buy because either they're a discount or you're convinced that they're going to do better, who would it maybe be, Eric?
So not only am I trying to buy, but I've actually acquired a ton of Baker Mayfield already this year.
Ooh.
And I'm kind of meh about him. I think that he still has some upside left in his game, but what you can get Baker Mayfield for out there is insane. I've gotten him for a fourth and a bench piece. I've gotten him for a third with a future pick coming back. So just based on the price tag alone, I'm out there stacking up a bunch of Baker chairs, surprisingly enough.
You're actually, if I had a little pen and pencil, right, pen and pad, I would probably write that down because when you said Baker, I was like, but then you said for a third or a fourth, it actually,
yeah,
I got a league, I got a league in mind right now where I could use a QB too. Baker would fit in right nicely. Sean's loving everything you're saying, Eric. He says Baker to the moon. He's got a blast off. You might have swayed me there. You're very convincing. I'm trying to think for who I would be buying. Why don't you go to who you're selling? Let me keep scanning here. You threw me for a Lynn with Baker, and then you're actually right. So who would you be selling if you're buying Baker?
Yeah, so I don't have him. I didn't have him in a ton of places, but I'm shopping around Jalen Hurts. A lot of this is really just to do with the hype around him stepping into that role. Carson Wentz leaving town. I wouldn't say that I'm out or down on Hurts as a player in this league. He didn't really do anything that knocked my socks off in a couple of games that he started, and people are treating him like he's already on his way to Canton. So anytime there's that disparity between what I've seen on the field and what people are willing to pay for him, I'm always trying to sell high on that. So I've moved him in one spot. I've got active combos going in a couple others. So moving on and trying to sell Hurts while his stock is super high.
And like you were mentioning, the kind of the inverse of Baker, I think you can probably sell Hurts at a pretty good price right now. We don't know what could happen there. There's all these, I think it'd be stupid, but there's these rumors they would draft a QB at 6. It could happen. So if you're selling them now, probably for a first or a second at least and some talent, I kind of like that. Okay, so you keep convincing me, and then I can't steal these. Who are you keeping? And then I'll try to bullshit my way through a couple of mine.
Yeah, so we talked about him a lot earlier. I'm holding on to Russ Wilson. The market is super polarized on him. There are people that have loved him forever and think that he's being undervalued. There are people that have some uncertainty around where he's going to play next year, how the OC is going to impact his game. So anytime there's that sort of polarization in the market, those are usually holds for me, and specifically in the case of Russ Wilson, so consistent. I'm happy to hang on to him for years to come. Honestly,
Right. And so in the chat, Sean, he's just on top of this. And I'm not stealing this, Sean, I promise, but he said he's buying Matt Ryan. And when you said you were buying Baker Mayfield, I started scanning. I said, Matt Ryan, he's ranked 18th here. There's a lot of smoke around him, them drafting a QB. Maybe they do that. I don't know. To me, Matt Ryan at 18, I think he can still operate as a top 12 QB for 3 to 4 years. Uh, he's got Arthur Smith, who's their head coach, who was the OC at Tennessee, that ran just basically ran Derrick Henry into the ground. So we were talking about Tannehill just being ultra efficient. Matt Ryan was doing it with just volume, and I think it'll be kind of in the middle there. But yeah, Matt Ryan to me, I think makes sense. Just the way the cloud over him that he might be at the very end of his road. He is old, but I still think he has 3 to 4 years. So I think if you're making offers out there for a Matt Ryan, most people are going to say, I don't want him. Yeah, let's work something out.
yeah, I would tend to think so, especially in the dynasty context, right? Whomever has Matt Ryan right now has likely had him for a while, and so they're probably actively looking for a way to move off of this asset. So you come in with a low ball offer and one that fits nicely into their sort of team picture overall. I think you can get him super cheap.
Selling here at all this I'm gonna be a pussy again and just caveat it, but it depends on who you have and what you're building. But to me, I think people like Burrow and Herbert, they're at an all-time high. I think you can get people that will just spend like crazy, especially on Herbert. And I like Herbert, and I have Herbert in a couple leagues, and I probably wouldn't be flipping him. But if you get that offer that it would command some firsts, some other skill positions, especially if you were established in that dynasty league for a couple of years, where maybe Herbert, I think he could have been had last year in like the second round or into the first round. He might have been drafted as like your QB3, and now he's being viewed as a QB1. Maybe trying to flip him for some really established people. Now that's radical, so I went a little crazy there. But to me, Herbert, where he's ranked right now, like 7. We talked about earlier, maybe we want Russ before it. Trevor Lawrence obviously is going to probably slot in above him. That to me, if you get the right offer, capitalize. Don't be too scared to move a guy that has 8-10 games under his belt and is now being coached by a defensive coordinator who knows what the heck's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, I'm probably not trying to move off of any Herbert shares that I own, but that's the beauty of this dynasty game, right? We have the ability to include upcoming draft picks, future year draft picks, current players, right? So you can get these really captivating offers put in front of you, and I think it's a Chris Rock quote: a man is only as loyal as his options, right? So someone puts a crazy package in front of you.
I think he was talking about
Hell yeah.
pussy and not the football players, but same thing. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line between the two, right?
Yeah. The keeping, to me, just going back to what I was saying about who I'm lower on. But if I have shares of these guys that are the perception around them is that they're the end of their line. They're about to be, either cut or going to lose their starting job. You got to keep them. So to me, I'll name one, Carson Wentz. I do not think you can trade him. I think there's too much stink around him. I don't care that he just got traded, all this stuff. You're just going to have to bite the bullet and just. I would kick myself more if I jumped off that wagon, because you're not going to get much value for him. No one's going to offer you a ton for him and just assume he's going to come back. He's injury prone. Last year, he's just awful. Now he's going to probably an offense that will try to run the ball a little bit more with JT. I think he'll be okay, but yeah, I'm not going to give pennies on the dollar and run that risk. I'm going to die with that ship basically. And some of these other guys like a Kirk Cousins, I don't think you can't go out and make the offer and expect to get value. Maybe you'll get surprised and someone will come after you, but yeah, those are the types of guys you're just gonna have to bite the bullet and just ride with them until they die.
Yeah, there are definitely some Eagles diehards out there that will probably overpay for Wentz now that he's had an opportunity to sort of start over and regain this job. But I mean, you're really threading the needle trying to find that dance partner, right? And at least within this sort of this sort of tier of quarterbacks, if things start to click for him, he arguably has some of the better upside out of this category. So the fact that you would have to sell him at a severe discount, and if you hold him and things go well, he could actually be far more valuable than where he sits now. Definitely fits in as a nice hold for me.
All right. Well, that does it for the QBs. Let's wrap it up. Let's do something a little fun here. We've already gotten through the Q&A, but Eric. So if people didn't know that Eric and I, this is our first time. This is our first dance, and I hope you guys liked it. I don't know. He was gentle. He was nice. We'll see how this evolves. We've talked about behind the scenes, maybe doing some beer bets. We'll have to put our brains together and figure out how we want that to be and how that to unfold. But there'll definitely be some drinking bets when we start hanging our hats on who we really like here. But let's get to know each other a little bit. So Q&A. Let me ask you, Eric. You're drinking beer right now. Are you do you like liquor? Do you drink liquor? What's your liquor of choice if you do?
Yeah, so Clay and I actually found out last week when we had to reschedule the show that we're both in Texas, so we're warming up now, and because of that, it goes hand in hand. I love me a good bourbon. Um, I probably won't drink a ton of it while we're on the stream because it dries my throat out a little bit. But whenever I'm chilling at the house, I've got a low ball in my hand and I'm nursing a bourbon a few nights a week.
So power rank for me. So bourbon's your number one. Give me, what are your other four that you'd be drinking? What your podcast juice?
Yeah, so bourbon number one. That's like the chill, trying to unwind. Just kind of free my mind and loosen up my head. Number two, or maybe even one A, is tequila. Um, I'm fortunate enough to be a Cinco de Mayo baby. My birthday is on May the 5th. So I've basically been force fed tequila since I was about 16 years old, and I've taken a shine to it. So you can really find one of those two working in my liquor cabinet at all times. And then really my third category is any and all variety of beer. There are a ton of cool Texas breweries, so always trying to work in a different six pack and really just try all the things that are out there.
And you were in the Houston suburbs for a while, so you went to, is it St. Arnold's? There's Carbach. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
you're. I forget
yeah.
the other one.
St. Arnold's was out there before craft beer was really a thing.
Yeah,
I remember Hey Mister and Guys for fancy lawnmowers. One of St. Arnold's more popular beers when I was still in high school.
nice.
And now craft beer is obviously everywhere. So for those who aren't in Texas, if you have an opportunity to pick up a sixer, St. Arnold's is certainly a great place to start.
So, love said Carbach. And then there's another one out there. They did the dome foam. I don't know. I don't remember who did it. I can think of the can. Who knows? Whatever.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but those are good. But beers. We're only doing like an hour-ish of this pod, so I can drink beers and not have to go piss. But otherwise, if it was going a little longer, I would probably have to switch to the liquor. I'd probably do a scotch or a bourbon, some vodka, tequila. I could
Give
do.
it a try.
Yeah, no, I've definitely taken a shit ton of shots. Not too big a fan of the margaritas, but whatever. But yeah, basically, I'd drink anything except gin. Gin's my last. What do you have a last place? I know there's a story behind it, but we'll save that for another time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty equal opportunity drinker, right? I definitely drink gin the least, but I think it's got its place, right? Summertime on a porch, mix it up with something kind of citrusy. It'll hit the spot. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love all equally. I keep a stocked cabinet, so
Okay.
I'm liable to have something different on any given night.
Well, there we go. So we'll be drinking a lots on the show, and it doesn't matter what. It'll just keep us going. Except we don't want to get anyone's voices dry. We'll work around that. But I think that kind of wraps it up. Eric, do you have anything else? Some parting wisdom? Obviously, in the next couple weeks, we'll do running backs, which will be more fun. And I guess my parting thing is we talked about QBs today. They can have a shelf life of 20 years if you get a Justin Herbert. They could theoretically play for the next 2 decades if your dynasty league goes that long. The fun thing with the running backs is we're now going to the other end of the spectrum. So stay tuned for that because they have a different shelf life, especially in dynasty. Any parting thoughts from you, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just those programming notes. So Clay and I will be here every other Friday for now. We're going to cover a position a week. So jumping over to the other end of the spectrum and covering some RBs next week. We got some cool stuff queued up for the draft, for free agency. So definitely stick with us. Stick with Going for Two for the latest updates on what we're working on. And more than anything, I know what Clay and I are really looking for in this show is engaging with you guys, right? So whether it's through the week, firing us with questions, definitely send us your feedback, how you think the show's going, what would make it more fun. But more than anything, how can you get involved, right? We're thinking about maybe bringing some beer bets to the audience and, paying off with a sixer here and there for those that are playing along with us at home. So definitely looking forward to, ramping up the season alongside Clay and getting to chat and hang out with the audience more and more.
Couldn't said it better myself, so I'll just wrap it up. Give me a follow on Twitter at notduckhodges.com, Eric at fantasynav. And there we go, guys. So thanks, and we will see you in a couple weeks to talk about the running backs. Take care, everybody.